Welcome to the Make School Great Again podcast, where we challenge the status quo in education and cast a bold kingdom vision for the next generation. I'm James Clanfield, and today's episode, we've got something truly special. Normally, Kale is co-hosting with me, but today we've flipped the mic, put him in the hot seat to tell the raw, redemptive story behind the Transformation Network. Kale, how you feeling, mate? Are you ready to be grilled?
Mate, I am ready. Turn the heat up. Let's
All right,
go.
fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Today's thesis, our focus is that there were warning signs well before the world shut down. The education system was strained, shallow, and spiritually empty. For those carrying the burden, COVID wasn't a surprise, it was the final signal to act. Kingdom Thinkers Academy rose from that movement with a redemptive blueprint for discipling the next generation. Look, I've been in KTA for a number of years now. I've heard a little bit of this story. I cannot wait to jump into hearing exactly where it's come from, some of those experiences along the way. Before it all began, before you were even Mr. Kneale, tell us about you, where'd you come from, who you are, and so that we have a bit of a context leading up until this very day.
Yeah, I grew up in southern parts of Sydney in a place called Cronulla. And during that time, I went to local public schools in neighboring areas and within, the Cronulla area. And I was one of those kids that was just dreaming about what I would do once my schooling had finished, particularly in high school. I actually enjoyed my primary school days. I remember just having like really good friends. My best friend at the time moved across the street, and he actually bought our family home, which is another story. But we ended up moving back across the other side of the road. But I meant that I had my best friend across the road. So I had a really good experience, generally speaking, growing up in school. Hit high school, I was like, I got to get out of here. I was heavily into music, all through even, primary years, but especially into high school, formed bands and were playing music. And I was always, just looking out the window, thinking about how good it would be to be touring and playing, across the world. And so that was where my head was at during those days. And that led to, the formation of a band in high school. That led to the band following high school, which became New Empire. And Jez, the lead singer, and myself, we started that, in my garage. We asked my cousin to join. And so we were just jamming in the garage, writing songs, making music. And that was what we were, I guess, pursuing at that time post high school. It was like, yeah, we had some odd jobs here and there, working at, shops and restaurants and whatever. But we just started playing, writing songs. Things led to another, things started to pick up. And so we were able to, essentially from about my early to turning 30 was pretty full on in the music scene, the band world, traveling Australia, the US, New Zealand, a little bit in Asia. And that was just an awesome time. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
Early on in the band days, I actually decided to go down the teaching route. But like I said earlier, it wasn't something that I was thinking about during my education at all. It was funny. My mum actually mentioned it to me when I was younger. She said, "Oh, you'd be a really good teacher." And I'm at a kid at this point, and I'm like, why would I want to go back to school?
Yeah.
After I finished, like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I think she saw something just in the way I interacted with younger kids and maybe the patience I had with them, maybe the adults didn't have. And so she saw that then. And then, during my early 20s, I'm on a family cruise and we're cruising the Pacific. Vanuatu was one of the stops. And then there's some other smaller islands along the way. And we get off on an island and, which is really only accessible by boat. So I think the locals actually travel there, set up the markets and, basically are there for the tourists. And so everyone on the boat hops off, they go to the island, buy things and just hang out. And so I found myself just hanging out with the local kids. We're playing a game of soccer. And it was this moment where it's kind of an overcast day, but the clouds opened up and the sun's shining through.
Epiphany.
Yeah. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, do teaching, get into education, do teaching. And it was sort of like, I remember having that moment of, oh, that's what mum saw then. I'm now getting this revelation that was bizarre because I hadn't really thought of it, but it was the thing that allowed me to get home. I text my buddy who I knew had started a teaching degree like a year prior. and I said, "Hey, I know you've started your teaching degree. Where are you? Can you send me the form?" And I
Yeah,
didn't
right.
even really look at like universities where I wanted to go. I just said, "Just get me the form. I'll get in there and fill it out." And at that time, I was actually 20. So I was entering at a mature age. I went and had an interview, got accepted, and the rest is
The
history.
rest is
I did
history.
full time for 2.5 years, deferred because of band stuff that was happening. We had to
Yeah.
do some touring that was meant I couldn't be turning up to university. And then along that journey, found out that you could actually study online. And so when I returned to studying after taking a break, I went to a different uni, carried those credits over, completed my degree online whilst on the road at times, and then was able to work in the school system, doing casual teaching, which was the perfect job because it was either have a job at like, a restaurant or selling t-shirts or
Yeah.
shoes or whatever,
Yeah.
or, work in a school for a day, get paid a lot better, and then be able to just take off again and not have that, I guess, expectation that you had to be somewhere every week. Cause I could
Mm.
just say to schools, "Oh, we're going to be away next week." They were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
okay. What about the week after?" And so I would just manage my schedule alongside the band, and which I was able to make the priority. So that was perfect.
Mm.
And so it
Yeah.
was very much like you're on the road and then you you fly in, you've got a casual day booked, you put, buttons go up, the
Yeah.
tie goes on, the
Make
day
some
finishes,
money.
tie's off,
Yeah.
totally different
Yeah.
worlds, but it worked for a time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And the Shire Boy dream, right? Starting a band in the garage, and then
Uh-huh.
it actually takes off, and sort of jumping between the formal and the oh yeah, I need to make some money now, and then on the road again, and like it sounds like, yeah, such a great start. But that all stopped, and you had to step into that full time. What was that sort of transition? Where did you end up, and how did that form the next sort of part of the story?
Yeah, so the band decided to finish up at the end of 2015, and that was a big year for the band because we'd been going for a solid 10 years. I mean, myself even longer with Jez in just high school bands and other various, band names that we had that eventually led to New Empire. So I mean, I've been playing music with Jez for 15 plus years, but we got to a point where it was like, okay, are we going to finish up, end on a high, and just be grateful for all the experiences we had, or do we reinvest in actually at the time we had an opportunity to go on a tour across the states for 2 or 3 months that would have meant a big investment from borrowing money and being able to sort of live and survive in the US. And while it would have been a great opportunity to play around the country for that long, we recognized the risk in, okay, well, we're going to have to pay this money back.
Yeah,
And at that point in our journey, we none of us just had the motivational urge to want to go and take that next step overseas full time, living there. So we decided, you know what? Okay, it was all pretty much decided
mm,
amicably. Let's do a final tour. We'll finish up on a high and go out and celebrate the journey that we had. And it was awesome. It was like the best tour. We had so much fun. And it was, towards that time, knowing that that was happening, I remember you looking at, okay, well, I'm doing this teaching. I finished my degree. Maybe it's time to get a real job.
take it
And
a bit
so
more
that's where,
seriously.
yeah, and so, timing wise, it was fine. I'd gone from this really unstructured lifestyle and living for the past 10 years to, okay, I think I'm ready to do something where I'll just have routine. And so for me, I was kind of excited just for a new way of doing life. And so I looked for some roles, and that led to, yeah, getting a job full time at an all boys private school. And, I remember in that interview just sharing my story about, I haven't been teaching full time in schools for 10 years, but here's my experiences. And they took me on, and that really started I guess the foundation of my development as not only a teacher, but my worldview in what I believed and the passions that I feel like the Lord put in my heart to then start really exploring in the education space to take that, step a little bit more seriously. So
Mm, mm.
yeah, it was a I wouldn't say a hard transition. It was just, all right, this is just the next season. Let's go.
Yeah, 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 and it definitely would have been sort of in recognizing that transition to go from, this was a way of life and now it's this, and this sort of forming of, all right, what's this going to mean for me, my identity, how I sort of operate in this space. And, stepping into an all boys Sydney school, like I've worked in a number of them, it is full on from day one, right? It's just, you're all in and all committed. So what were some of the key moments in taking on that job? What did you learn? What was the things that really formed that worldview for you?
Yeah, well, at the time I was living fairly far away from the school. So it meant that my commute was actually an hour to an hour and a half each way.
Yeah.
So I'm driving, a big distance to get to school and then on the way home, which, I remember thinking at the time, look, I'm not actually going to do this forever, but for a period of time, I'm just going to commit to it and I'll just wear it. It's just going to be part of life. Wasn't married at the time, didn't have kids. So that those times either side of school, I had more flexibility,
Yeah.
And so I took that on, and I remember thinking, if I'm going to be in my car for so long, like, let's make this a productive experience. And so, I put, the priority of developing my faith and my commitment to the Lord in those years. And so I'd listen to podcasts, I'd listen to sermons, I'd listen to one particular gentleman called John Haller, who's a Christian guy in the US. And he was just running, like, he called them prophecy updates, but they were a collection of news events happening around the world in real time. And so he would record them on the Sundays. I'd get them on the Monday morning driving into school. And it was almost just like the drive was his update. So that was my news. And what was really good about that was he would collate news from around the world, meaning I didn't have to, but he wouldn't necessarily editorialize it from a biased perspective. He would just play clips from people talking about the different things happening around the world. And so I'm hearing all of these, politics and world events happening from the people making these decisions. And he'd have all these clips. He'd have newspapers and he'd read headlines that newspapers from around the world are saying about different topics. And so as I'm driving into school, I'm getting, I guess, quite an education in just the happenings of the world and what's going on. In a really good summarized way that allowed me to just be thinking about education, my job, what's going on, what are the influences happening, which I'm very thankful for because, as you know, you turn on mainstream news here, you're not getting any of that. So that time and that commute for that job became probably the best thing that happened to me during my time at the school because it gave me the time to develop my worldview and led to those convictions then that began to unravel as, I began to have, agitations and clashes with how things were being done in the school. So it really did shape my understanding of the world at a big level.
Yeah. I love that. It's not necessarily the experience of working in one of the top boys boarding schools in Sydney, or the opportunities that are. It's like the journey to and from, and those opportunities to grow and learn and to really take advantage of that. And so in this time, obviously, this worldview is starting to form. It's starting to shape, and things are starting to come into play. So what is this now leading to when it comes to the worldview shaped? You're recognizing things in the world, and then the almost the fruits or the actual implementation or that sort of coming into.
So the application of that knowledge was huge because here I am being reaffirmed not only and strengthened in my faith, because it wasn't just listening to the news updates every day. That was one of the 5 days a week. But what it did do was just reaffirm the strength and the authority of Scripture from a prophetic point of view to say, no, actually, we've actually been given the playbook with how things started, why we're here, where we're going, and what it looks like at the end. So it's those sort of things started to form into place a lot more strongly for me, and I had that conviction about what was happening. And then, but what was interesting was what I saw in the classroom. The playbook was completely different. So it felt like I was watching a different playbook being handed to students in that space, and one that contradicted reality. It denied the design and left no room for like a prophetic or biblical understanding of why things are actually happening the way they are.
Yeah, right.
And so, one of the early, KTA slogans that I was developing was, we know why we're here, where we came from, and where we're going. And that really came from that time where that was what was lacking in the school that I was at and what I saw happening. But the kids, were being told the opposite, and it was being framed as truth and reality.
Mm.
And so, these events are happening. This is pre-COVID time. So we're talking like, 28, all the way from basically 2016, 17, 18, 19. And so, I remember because of that event that was to come just prior to that, one of the things that was talked about in these news updates was this event 201, right? Which was this simulated experience or simulation that basically was to prepare nations for what would be some kind of coronavirus pandemic. And this is coming out October 18, 2019, just weeks before the real thing actually started. So I remember hearing about that and going, yeah, okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Red flag here.
Yeah, that's right.
And so there's this simulation happening, and then I'm thinking, and then when it started to unfold, I'm thinking, well, hang on, like I remember there was this event that they've been running through how they would respond and everything. And so I was just asking questions or thinking about things from that perspective, like, hey, should we be investigating this a little bit further? Like, sounds a little bit scripted, but no one else that I was working with was really paying attention to that or knew that was something that had actually happened. And fast forward, COVID hits the world, and this is kind of that part one phase where the vaccine hadn't been developed yet and all of that. And then you fast
scare
forward.
of the virus more so than
It was scare of the virus.
Yeah.
The whole propaganda machine began.
Yeah.
And we're seeing images and videos of things happening that, people were questioning.
Yeah.
And then, I'm aware of people like Klaus Schwab, like, who is the former head of the World Economic Forum. He only recently, I think he was booted out, wasn't he?
Should have been a long time ago.
He brings out a book like not long after COVID hits called, The Great Reset, COVID-19. And I'm thinking, yeah, this isn't right. Like, is anyone asking questions? And in my world, no one knew who Klaus Schwab was. And I'm thankful that these news reports that I was getting was informing me about just these people and what their agendas are. And not even, here's what I think their agenda is. Here's a clip of this guy talking at an event or a conference. So I'm listening to these plans unfold. And, his key strategy was to use this crisis as an opportunity to basically reset the economy, society, and governance. So I'm like, red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the COVID machine is starting to pick up and do its thing. And so they're talking about digital surveillance, biometric tracking, global governance over national autonomy and all these things. And so I'm in this, I've taken on this job, and I'm starting to see those influences come into curriculum. And so for me, that began the agitation of, I know what's on back of these things that's coming in. And I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable with rolling out a curriculum within the school and teaching it as the framework that we view the world through, what is the UN sustainability goals, right? That's their plan for global dominance, and they have an agenda to infiltrate curriculums all over the world. International Baccalaureate being, I guess, the key driver of that framework and way of thinking. And so, as a Christian, I'm just starting to ask questions. Like, this isn't conspiracy. This is out there. Anyone can find it.
Yeah.
And so it was forcing me to go back to scripture, Genesis to Revelation. Like I said, we've got the playbook.
Yeah.
What are the connections that we see happening here from this perspective versus what the world is saying and what these globalist elites are telling us is sort of the new norm now that this event has happened? And so, it was this cognitive dissonance that I guess lit the flame for deeper questioning, right?
Yeah.
And, this eventually gets to the point where I'm being told to put the UN sustainability goals up in the classroom.
Yeah, right.
And knowing all the things I did about it, and it wasn't like, oh, you can put these up if you want. It was every classroom, you need to put this up.
We're doing this. Yeah.
Yeah. Where this is the framework that we're going to view the world, and we want to teach the kids to view the world through. And so all of this is happening, I'm thinking, I,
Something needs to be done.
there's
Yeah.
two options.
Yeah.
You stay in it and you
Yeah.
complain behind closed doors to friends, oh, this, and you just grow, you know, bitter, or you think of ways, well, what can I do?
Mm.
What is it that I can do? Am I going to stay here and be bitter, or do I look for other opportunities somewhere, make a move? And that's where I got to after seeing, I guess, the influence that was being pushed through
Yeah.
the global bureaucrats on Australian schools.
Yeah, and it's I very much know what you're talking about here, and especially the sort of it's almost like the preconditioning. It's the premeditating. It's the or desensitizing of all these things that were whether it be premeditated or pre-scripted and bound to be planned and happened, but it sort of aligns with the whole. All right, well, what are we teaching in these schools because they go for the youth, right? We go for the youth because they're the ones that are the most influenced and they set those societal norms, whatever that next thing is. So you're now at this stage where you've gone from sort of looking at this the curriculum that's starting to be adulterated or intentionally sort of this is the way that it's going to be, this is our framework, this is what we're teaching from, this is what we want the kids to believe. You've got then this cognitive dissonance where you're like, oh, well, this is what I'm hearing in the news and where it's coming from and what I guess you believe and see the scripture, the word of God to say. So you said there's two things you could do. You could either, or three probably, you could stay in it, complain, stay in there and try to do something about it, take that next step, or just run away and give up completely. So what did you do?
Yes. So during that time, I remember waking up at 3 a.m. and for me, that time in the night when I wake up is either I can't sleep, or two, I have the clearest thoughts and ideas about things. And like, there's been times where I'd wake up in the night and I'd have like an idea for a song or something. So it's just something about being asleep and the creativity that happens
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have the most clear moments of like an idea or a solution to a problem. And so that was where essentially the 5 themes of the KTA framework came out of, because it was a response to what I saw as the macro concepts being taught in the school.
Mhm.
I was like, there needs to be a response to this, or what's the biblical, response to what's being taught from this point of view or perspective. And so that was the 5 things, which are made in his image, which was a response to what's being taught about identity. I mean, it's huge now, right?
Yeah.
In his hands, the idea of or sort of earth sciences and why we're seeing, the movement on the earth's surface like we are, and the increase of different events that are happening seismologically, is there a spiritual connection to that from what we see in scripture? Alpha and Omega, history. Well, I mean, if there's been 20
Anything
years
that's going to inform something, it's history.
and the revisionist, talking points of history that we've seen in the curriculum and the rewriting of events is so huge. I thought, well, we need a theme on history. That was Alpha and Omega, beginning and end. Creation, that reflected just the battle for the origin story, like not state of origin, but the origin story
Queensland.
of the world. And so, and that's huge. I mean, that's been a battle going on forever within school systems. And even within the Christian schooling system, I saw that there was a very broad spectrum of views on just what scripture actually means, what it says in Genesis 1. And whether that's theistic evolution or day age theory and all these different approaches. So I saw this spectrum of origin and differences that I thought, you know what, I'm convinced on taking the Bible literally on this, and so that theme was developed. And then a big one at the time, I mean, in the world, not of it, is the theme that was developed to tackle the idea and build an understanding for kids on government and its role scripturally in the world and how we respond as Christians, being in the world but not being of it. I'm not pushing that we become like the Amish and seclude ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to exist in this world. How do we do it in a way that honors God and is aware of the signs and the times? Like, I think that's really important. So that theme was developed. So there were 5 things that became quite clear in that 3 a.m. moment. I wrote them down on my phone as notes. And that became, I guess, the conceptual point where I thought, okay, here's a blueprint that I think I could take somewhere. Maybe it was sort of that subconscious exit plan thinking. that I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got these sustainable ability goals, 17 of them, and then, this framework that comes to you at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
So from here, you thought, all right, I can be in a position where I can, whether it be these 5 themes or something to sort of step in a space of influence or authority or make change, because you didn't want to run from it and you didn't want to complain from it. So you took on a master's. So what was that? What's the significance of that? And how is that part of that transition into that next step for you?
Yeah, the masters was something that I wasn't, thinking about doing really. I mean, in my decisions in education, when I look back, it's all been these like moments where the Lord's gone, do this.
Yeah.
And I've
The
just had to be
cloud
obedient.
opening, the epiphany, the sun
Yeah,
coming down. You sound like you got all these moments.
yes. I think at the end of my life, I mean, I'm probably able to look back and you always see things much more clearly, but that's how it's literally been. Because
Yeah.
I finished my degree. It took me probably, this is my bachelor's. It took me, I think, just over 7 years to complete, like doing it full time, having a break, doing it part time, spreading it
Online
out.
part. Yeah.
I just did it across. And so by that point, I was like, the last thing I'm doing is going to do more study. So, at the time with this wrestling ideas I'm having in this job, I'm at the gym, I'm trying to clear my head. And I remember the Lord just said, go and do a master's. And I remember thinking, oh, that is the last thing I want to do, because I'm not somebody who is, like I said, actively seeking out further study necessarily. But I felt that need to do that for the sake of, showing myself approved for a position that could potentially have influence in an educational space. So I took that on. The master's was on international education with a focus on school leadership. So it sort of zoomed out on education around the world. And so that particularly piqued my interest because I wanted to have an understanding of how things were being done around the world and the history of that and where things are working, not working, the why behind all of that. So I actually did enjoy elements of it. It is funny. I surprised myself with how well I did in that. I think my degree, I got through it.
Yeah.
P's get degrees, that kind of mindset.
Love
Get
it.
to the master's, and I actually did quite well. And so I guess, we talk about interest and passion-based learning. I mean, that was an example for me where I was passionate about this topic. And so that came through with my essays and things. And so I did quite well. So it set me up to be thinking, all right, if I'm going to take a role, in Australia, generally to have a deputy or principal role, you need a master's. It's sort of a baseline requisite usually. So I started doing that. And then I'm also looking at other opportunities in schools to say, hey, I'm doing a master's now. This is where I want to go. Is anyone willing maybe to take me on prior to the master's finishing? And so I'm looking around. I take on a role where I almost accepted a principal role in rural Victoria.
Yeah, right.
And so that was a big moment where I thought, okay, well, here's maybe the time where I'm going to step into a role that I could I've got this idea for a curriculum, scope and sequence. Maybe I roll this out if it's the right opportunity at that point in time. This is pre-COVID 2.0. This is like sort of before it really ramped up. Actually, no, this is before COVID actually happened. And so we get offered this role. My wife is feeling not confident about this.
Yeah, right.
And she felt from the Lord that this wasn't the position to take. And so I took her advice on that and trust in the Lord that this wasn't the move. And so thankfully we didn't take that job. COVID happens, the world shuts down.
Yeah,
Victoria,
right.
we all know what
Yeah.
happened there. Most lockdown city in the
Epicenter
world.
of
Yeah, state in the world. It was a disaster. So I eventually, because I turned that role down, I get put into another. This is within a different organization now. I get sent to another location in Western Sydney as sort of like a holding phase, because I didn't take that job. Okay, we'll put you here and we'll give you some other roles to do while we, find the next opportunity for you. And so that was, from thinking we're going to go to Victoria, move to Western Sydney. COVID happens. Western Sydney wasn't much better than Victoria, to
No.
be honest. Like the lockdowns and the 5K restrictions they
that's
had
it.
were intense. There was helicopters flying overhead.
It's all that stuff that, a couple of years earlier you were hearing about in these news updates or articles or,
It's like, this is like what's coming. These are the things what people are talking about. Klaus Schwab, he's talking about this idea of tracking and knowing where people are and what they're buying and where they're going, and just this ability to control society. And so I'm seeing this now
Play
unfold
out. Yeah. Wow.
at a high level where we were living. And I understand that different pockets around Australia experienced this to differing degrees. Some were still able to do most of the things they were, prior to it all happening. But where we were, it was tough. Like I remember seeing police going around to doors, checking why someone had said that they had gone to their other house and why were they leaving this house? And it was just sort of
It
that
was
nanny state
crazy, right?
became
Just so
reality.
dystopian. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a
so that
mental
was
time.
tough. Yeah. It was a tough time.
So in that sort of, we're in lockdown, you've got sort of these leadership opportunities, and the whole idea that you've taken on this master's and wanting to sort of step into this place is sort of like, you've got this framework, especially for a biblical worldview for Christian schools. You took it to your school at CEO. What did that do? Was that effective? And what did you realize as a result from that conversation?
Yeah. So, prior to things really ramping up, I remember having some opportunities to talk to, the CEO of the organization and just mention the framework and my vision and passion for something like that. And I think that, that's anytime you're wanting to initiate change in the education system, I mean, change, it's like, it doesn't happen, right? And my studies revealed that, like, it was a recurring pattern. Like, to get any change or the wheels of change to move, education system, it's so hard. There are so many moving parts and so much red tape. And so I understood that my idea would radically transform how a school could operate. And so, for someone to sort of take that idea on and flip and basically redesign and reshape how education looks within their schools, that's a big ask, right? So, but basically the idea was sort of like, yeah, okay, yeah, not really. Don't think that's going to work, and that was fine. I remember there was somebody else in the organization at the time I told, and they were thrilled with the idea, and I thought, okay, I got one person, one person gets it, but in any event, like all those setbacks with conversations I had about my idea was more fuel to be like, no, I'm still really passionate about this.
Yeah.
If it's not here, okay,
It's going to be somewhere.
it's got to be somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'll keep pushing on, within the system. So I'm, in that environment, I'm trying to do it not through an official capacity, but I understood that, okay, well, my framework can still play a role in how I'm teaching in that current time with the students I have in front of me. And so that was sort of an ability. I had an ability to do that to a degree in that time, which was great. But then, COVID ramps up. Vaccine mandates become a real big issue at the time, particularly with the teaching and, nursing world. And so that's when, the heat really turned up.
Yeah. Yeah. It did for a lot of us in who took a particular stance at that time. And I won't go into it now, but yeah, I know that you're about to go into your whole story of how your whole world was sort of shook, and that happened the same for us, but it was like the formation of this brand new thing and way of doing what you do. Tell us that story. I love this story. This is great. So essentially,
the COVID mandate thing ramps up. They're forcing everybody to get, the state approved treatment, as I call it.
Yeah.
And so, those that, if you didn't, you're out. If you did, you're in. That was just the bottom line. There was no, sort of middle ground understanding, which was a shame, because I think leadership across the school, many schools, I don't know of many that actually stood up to the nonsense going on, and so it was handled very poorly for a lot of people everywhere. And, that's just an example of, I think, that whole period. I remember being quite shocked that no one really else knew what was just going on globally, like in the news and things that were happening, and were just happy to swallow the narrative that was being pushed by the media. And so that was sad to see that happening, and being like, I feel like, again, we're operating in different realities of what is actually going on. So forced to resign from that job, have to hand back in the laptop that you have, teachers usually get laptops.
Yeah.
And so I remember thinking, well, that was a moment of, okay, well, I need to get a new laptop because that would be my ticket to
Mm.
rebuilding, whatever
Uh-huh.
that was. That would be my great reset, as
Yeah.
Klaus Schwab coined. And so I get online, go to the Apple store. Okay, where we have to now move from this Western Sydney location. I teed it up with some family living down the south coast that were going to just be able to house us whilst we figured out next steps. Before we left, I'm like, I need a laptop. Go on to Apple store. I go to the checkout phase and it says, oh, in order to pick up your laptop, to come to the store, you need to have the state approved treatment.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you kidding me? Like they're really trying to punish,
Yeah,
those
it
who are
was
just going
punishment.
in. It was
Definitely.
punishment.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, surely I can call them and maybe I can get someone to drop the laptop out in the loading dock or something and just do a drive by.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
For
think
the
I
lower
called them and I
class.
said, yeah, I called them and I said, hey, this is the situation. I've just bought a laptop, but you're saying I can't come to the store to get it. Can someone just walk it out? Seriously. So, I get to the Westfield. I'm walking the top level. I'm going past all the different stores and they've all got their signs up saying, vaccinated only, can't come in the store. So it was just like, it was very eerie in
Yeah.
that
Now you
I
live in
wasn't
it.
allowed in these
Yeah.
stores.
You
And
live in it.
I'm walking towards the Apple store. I told the person there, hey, I can't come in. The store was quite busy and full with everyone,
Vaccinated.
standing apart and following it all. And someone comes out, they said, yep, here's your laptop. And I remember receiving that just going, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
I have a ticket and a tool that I know I'll be faithful with. So
Yeah.
tucked it under the arm. I'm running out of Westfield
Yeah.
as fast as I can go. We hit the road. We start making our way down to a family's farm. And that began, I guess, the next part of the journey. It was freedom because I was breaking out of that Western Sydney bubble. And it was like the fresh air. It was almost like I'd been let out of prison. My hands out the window, feeling the air. I'm seeing the coastline.
Yeah.
We'd escaped.
Yeah.
And we were going somewhere that wasn't suburbia. It was much more fresh, open air, which we got out of the car when we arrived and it was like kiss the ground.
Yeah.
Had no job, but
But you're kissing the ground.
it was one of
Yeah.
those happy moments of thank God for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So that entered the next phase.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've driven down, you kiss the ground. You paint this to be really beautiful, but it wasn't really that sort of
Live.
rainbows and butterflies, was it?
Yeah. So we, location wise, amazing. Living condition wise was a challenge. I was grateful that our family opened up the property they had they have, and it used to be an old motel room on top of this mountain, and they had taken it over and use it for different purposes. But they basically just said, hey, you can have one of the motel rooms that really old. It just had a bed and bathroom, space for a table, and then there was another facility on the property that we could do our cooking and washing and things. And so that was where we were going to live and sort of rebuild. And so I remember getting there and thinking, okay, I've got my laptop, I've got my tool to
Make
do
money.
whatever is the next step. All right, Wi-Fi. So no Wi-Fi. I'm like, okay, reception. Let's check some hotspotting. 1-2 bars on a good day.
Yeah.
And so, I'm thinking, okay, could slow things down a little bit. That in itself was a challenge. I remember just the speed of being able to do things hooked up to my phone was much slower. But that became the place where I had just that mental space to go, well, all of those ideas, here's the time I can actually put them down. There's no pressures of a job. We'll be okay for the time being. We've got a little window to kind of regather ourselves. And so that was, just one of those moments where I had to just make the most of it. And so, I remember at the time found out my wife was pregnant and we'd been trying for years, but it was like we got there, no job, we find out she's pregnant. And so, it adds an extra pressure.
It does.
What are we going to do? Like,
yeah.
as the man, I need to be able to provide. And so I'm thinking, well, I'll pick fruit. We'll do whatever it takes to make ends meet. My wife actually accepted a role milking cows.
Yeah.
And so she's getting up at 3:30 a.m.
Pregnant.
Yeah, pregnant to go milk cows.
Raw milk. You get some good raw milk that way.
Yeah. You bring back the raw milk. She smelled terrible when she got home, but I was just like, babe, you're really doing it for the fam right now.
Yeah.
So all power to her. She was with me through that time. And so, I took on a tutoring job online because that was
Yeah.
one of the things you could do. You're behind a screen. So as the pariahs we were that didn't take the state approved treatment, that's something we could do. So I was able to do a couple of things from that perspective and learn how different, I guess, tutoring companies at the time were facilitating that space. And that started me thinking, okay, well, if I was to do something myself, what would it look like?
Yeah.
But I remember, never forget, because the Wi-Fi or the reception was so bad, I'd walk around the property trying to find the best reception, and it would change. I don't know why this was the case, but the
Yeah.
reception would change depending on where you were. And so I would find myself, I'd rug up because it was cold, it was on a
Yeah.
mountain. I'd sit under a tree because it had reception. And the kids actually thought the background was fake. And I was
Yeah,
like, no,
right. Yeah, that's me.
this
I'm
is where
there
I
on
am.
top of a mountain.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then I'd go to they had like a meeting room for one day, and it was pretty good reception there. So I'm in there and it's raining, and I'm in the middle of a session working for this company. I'm getting $30 an hour,
Yeah.
and the rain starts.
About the same as if you're in, full-time teaching. So
Yeah.
it's
At this point, it was like, well, that's a better rate than picking fruit, so
yeah.
I'm going to take that.
Yeah.
And the water starts to fill up around me.
Yeah.
I'm on this session. I'm thinking, I don't want to interrupt this session. I was committed to finishing the session. I was committed to getting paid.
Yeah.
And I'm
And you're
thinking, all
only
right,
place for the
yeah,
actual reception. So if you did move, there's nowhere
that's
to
right.
go.
That's right. So I'm thinking, okay, with the speed at which the water is rising around me, how long I've got the session, I think I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my uncle's there with a broom, brushing water out. I'm sitting in a session just with water filling up around me. So that was a funny moment of just, some of the situations
That you just have to make it work, right?
yeah, you have to make it work, right?
Yeah. No, I've got a few instances similar to that story in that time, and you make it work because you have to. There's no other option. But also because you know that there's something bigger and better for you that God has for you. You just might not see it yet, but it is all about that preparing. And for you, that's sort of where KTA really started to have its birthplace, right?
That's right. That was the place in that motel room was where I wrote the homeschooling with purpose in a work culture.
Yeah.
And so that space I talked about having allowed me to put down those ideas in a way that just allowed me to essentially just get it out and make it available for people. It's kind of like, here's what I believe about education. And I'm going to see if this resonates with anyone. Because like I said, my experiences in sharing it with people kind of weren't interested, so much, but I still was passionate and had that desire to, like most people, whenever you get that resistance, it's more motivation, right?
Yeah.
And that it worked that way for me. And so I created that ebook document, which you can get by downloading our prospectus today. It's that same document. I haven't updated it. It's just, that was a key moment in time that developed that thinking on paper. And so that allowed that time. And I remember in that moment, my wife's American. So we were thinking, well, maybe if we can eventually get out of here, maybe I'll take a job in the US. And so alongside the tutoring gig I picked up for $30 an hour, I'm having these high level interviews for private schools in the US for principal role.
Yeah.
And, I'm finding myself in like one particular interview, they had literally like 20 plus staff all on the Zoom call.
Yeah, wow.
Basically looking at me as somebody that was going to be their leader. And so they're asking me questions. What are you going to do? Or what do you aim to do in the first 100 days of your appointment? And I felt like I was running for president at this point. And so, you're having these high level Zoom interviews. I remember one, you realize, oh, I'm on a big screen in a boardroom.
Yeah.
You see the NFL football stadium out the back.
Yeah.
And you're just thinking, this is a big deal. And here I am trying to get Wi-Fi.
Water rising up around you, or, the building falling apart, bars. No.
Contrast of locations was hilarious. But in those times, I actually got to pitch the KTA idea to some of these school boards, not giving away every ideas in depth, but just what I would bring to that organization. And so I did that, and it was actually received a lot more with a lot more understanding in the US context, which didn't surprise me, but there was an openness to the framework I developed in that space, which gave me, I guess, motivation to be like, no, I'm onto something here. But, and my appointment in any of those schools never came due to various reasons, but one of which they didn't know when I'd be able to get into the country. And so whilst there was interest and we really want you, and some schools wanted me more than others, the question of, well, when can you get here? And I just couldn't tell them because no one knew. So things fell apart there. And I started thinking, well, maybe it's not a school to have or something I'm going to bring to a school. Maybe it's something that I can keep for myself and build organically from the ground up here or in the online space. And so that's what I started to do in that time more deeply. And so, after working as a tutor, I built enough understanding about how their systems. I created Kingdom Thinkers Academy tutoring service. And I remember offering just free sessions, to families. Like, I'm starting to put my business hat on. Like, all right, what's a marketing technique to get
Yeah.
customers?
Yeah. Free
Free trial.
trial.
Yeah. I'm like, it's a little less than $30, but not much. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter anyway.
Yeah.
So, you start doing that, you're building a small base of students. And, so Kingdom Thinkers Academy, whilst it's this big school-wide concept and idea, I was just able to go, well, let's just start with the tutoring first and let's just build step by step in time. Even though I knew that eventually it would be rolled out digitally or location-wise in the future, I could start with tutoring and just have an impact that way to begin. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you've gone from $30, oh, I could do this myself, and really with intention to go, I've got this great biblically aligned and underpinning framework. And then, starting to build that. And then you come in the sort of next step, you've got KTA there, tutoring service, and then a new thing comes up, iProject International. So we've got a few things that start to grow and evolve over time, and see how this, I guess, tutoring service initially starts to become this movement, starts to become something much bigger. So how is this ecosystem starting to build out?
Yeah, KTA is running as a tutoring company. I go on a podcast which is seen by a young girl or young lady, should I say, who had actually seen me, recognized me from the band days, funny enough, and came to shows back in the day. And she reached out to me after and said, hey, I saw you on this, I'm in a similar position. Maybe if there's something we could ever collaborate on in the future, that would be great. Kind of just reaching out, touching base. And so, we connected briefly that way. And then that was it for a month or two. And then she reaches back out to me and she says, hey, I've actually turned this offer down a few times, but they keep asking me. And so I thought I'd just ask you and see if it'd be something you'd want to do with me. And basically she'd been approached by somebody who was sent out by a family to say, hey, we got out of Australia during COVID
Yeah, well.
and we realized that we still want an education for our kids. How can we do that? We're going to look for some private educators. Ideally those that had actually been discarded from society. We want to help and support them.
Yeah,
And so she asked me, hey, would you want to investigate what this could look like for both of us if we take them on as their children's private educators? And so we met the family, beautiful family, still with us today. And we started developing learning plans for their two kids, customizable to where they were in the world, and took all of our teaching knowledge that we'd had and basically just threw it into developing customized learning plans. And that was the birth of iProject International. So that started to develop, in an unplanned way, but just came about at the right time because, working in that environment and trying to, think about the next steps, there was a moment where you're like, Lord, where are you in this? We all have had those moments.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that sort of rock bottom moment of, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. And there has to be a way out that this opportunity came about, which again is the Lord's faithfulness in, situations where you feel strongly convicted to not do something. The Lord honors that and will still look after you, So that was a real test of faith that was then, and prayers answered that there's a family that's going to be willing to take you on as their child's private educator with somebody else. And this was starting to move. And so that was starting to build, that formed iProject International, which became its own brand and approach and service for families looking to travel around the world.
Yeah.
All while Kingdom Thinkers Academy tutoring still happening. And then, in time, iProject starts to grow and develop. We had some success with some collaborative online learning that was going on. And I remember thinking, I actually think it's time to launch a KTA class, to kind of go back to that original vision for KTA and it not be just a tutoring, business, but actually start to really fulfill what the mission and the goal is, to develop a biblical worldview. And so we put a call out, had a really good response, and basically picked a cluster of kids that were sort of grouped around a similar age at the time, and just said, okay, that's the class. I feel that the Lord said, do this age group.
Yeah.
So I went with that, and that's today become and is the biggest class
biggest
we have
class.
currently.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's just, the Lord is amazing. And so we ran the KTA classes. So that it kind of started, was the original goal, but ended up starting the latest. But that was the Lord's timing in it all coming about. And so, Kingdom Thinkers Academy, no longer a tutoring based business anymore. So we rebranded it to Thinkers Academy because KTA became what it was ultimately designed to be.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. And, that leads to TTN, the Transformation Network.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of where I came in at this timeline. So I think I came in whilst KTA was more so tutoring. I remember coming on and tutoring whilst we were traveling around Europe, and again, a bit of extra coin. And also sort of going, I really love what this is about, what KTA is about, and the potential of that. Sort of, I remember coming in, tutoring, and then sort of talking about a few iProject stuff and helping out in that space. And then, talking about, this class coming up, and all right, let's build it out, and what's that going to look like? And then, so that then, I guess, gave us that social proof for, all right, we've got something from a framework that you've already had, and then also we've got an audience there that is saying yes to these classes, which from the beginning of this year has just taken off and grown every single term since. So then so it's only really just these past couple of months that these different branches have become TTN, or the Transformation Network. So what is that ultimate vision or currently of what Transformation Network is about? Why does it matter? What is this education ecosystem that we've got here?
I think ecosystem is such a good word to describe it, because it's all part of one overarching banner, which is the Transformation Network. And as the programs or the branches or the brands formed into their three distinct identities, it became clear that it needed to be more than just three distinct brands, because they were interconnected in ways. I mean, we have kids that would start with tutoring and move to classes, or, were doing some iProject and wanted to go to classes. So there was this interconnectedness between them all. And just structurally, from a legal perspective, and just how we could create a stronger foundation and framework for these programs to exist, that then led to the formation of the Transformation Network as a not-for-profit organization that could, I guess, oversee and host these programs and have, a little bit more of a religious protection around what we were doing, because our mission is to develop a biblical worldview. And in Australia currently, I mean, those freedoms are largely under attack.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just not in the homeschooling world. I mean, the schooling world is feeling the effects of that as well.
Yeah.
So that was the, part of the thinking, to just help protect the mission of why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And so, and that was it's talking to parents along the way. I'm hearing the same story and the same message, that parents are becoming increasingly, uncomfortable and not happy with the school system, even Christian schools, and are looking for an alternative. And so, we exist in the homeschooling world, and we're not linked to government agencies or anything, because we recognize the parents' responsibility and role to be the primary educator in that space. We just come alongside and help facilitate and partner with families. So, for us, it was like, well, this is a great opportunity to exist in a space where parents need support. We're not a school, but we've got staff and experience that understand that world better than, a lot. And we can now bring that to this space and help families get set up from a homeschooling perspective. And, some people ask me, will you ever create a school, like a physical school? I don't know. I guess the Lord
That
I'll
next
take the Lord's
cloud
word on
moment.
that.
The next
Yeah, well, I'll
cloud
wait for the
moment.
next
Maybe.
cloud moment.
Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, it hypothetically it could, because the framework could facilitate that, but whether that's the plan yet, I'm not sure. For now, we've found a really good space where we're helping support families, and a lot of parents are saying, "Thank goodness, I didn't know you existed, or this was
Yeah.
here."
Yeah.
How good this? We don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, particularly from like the curriculum compliance registration point of view. You've got trained teachers now facilitating that through classes and group learning each week. So it, was something that I think Australia hasn't had in
Mm,
that
yeah.
context. Homeschooling's been around for a while, but just the ability to have group classes and
Mm,
a framework that could facilitate the learning each week
yeah.
hadn't existed.
No. And one that well, especially for Australians, obviously that is aligned to sort of outcomes that are recommended or from a school perspective needing to be hit, but not in a way that is sort of influenced by these other authorities and governmental sort of pressures. Yeah, I love the term ecosystem as well because they are so intertwined and having worked, sort of working in all three spaces, and the sort of crossover and the students and the student needs and as much as there is the crossovers, there's also the sort of individual sort of audiences that it serves with KTA, with that sort of especially homeschooled typically or group, and iProject, which is a bit more one-on-one and or one on small group and more sort of designed around the students' focus of a project or what they prefer. And then our Thinkers Academy, similar to we've got a number of school kids that join us for Thinkers Academy in that tutoring space. So yeah, I love the ecosystem, how it interweaves, but also there is that support and that connectedness also not just on that education level, but on that community level as well. And I think that's part of the bigger vision of what Transformation Network is also about, right? It's that community, it's that support. It's not just we've got a great framework from an educational point of view, but to be a kingdom thinker, and we talked about this a few episodes ago, it's the body, the heart, the mind, and the soul, right? And so that is that all that connectedness, not just those learnings. So I love being part of it. My kids love it. My wife who does the homeschooling stuff with them, she loves it. Just is a good fit for us, and it makes sense because of the way that the world is going and the way that the world probably not even going is now, which probably is a great segue into our Around the Grounds in education, sort of looking at some of the current news. Around the grounds, around the grounds, around the grounds in Christian education. All right, welcome back to Around the Grounds in Christian Education. Thanks, James. You've handed the mic and the screen back to me. Straight back.
Let's jump into our first, I guess, trend we've seen that's been happening. And this has been happening, I wouldn't say in the last week, but this year there's been a huge surge in Christian school enrollments. Apparently a 30% increase over a decade in New South Wales.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of Christian schools are really seeing their numbers double due to a values-driven demand, which isn't a surprise given everything we're seeing happening in society. I think Christian families and non-Christian families, for that matter, are seeing that they still want that to exist in some form for their child's education. And so there isn't a surprise those numbers are increasing, and that's, I think, naturally flowing into the homeschooling space, that parents are wanting something different again, but numbers in this public system are declining.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, it
Surprise?
doesn't surprise me at all. I've sort of only worked in Christian independent context or Catholic schools, and the whole reason of why there is faith-based schools is that it's values-driven. It is that faith-based, and as much as we've talked multiple times about how that has been sort of the government oversight and the agendas that are even pushed in schools, there are still many that try to hold on to, or at least providing something different to the state or the governmental system. And yeah, I know with some of the schools that I've worked in that it isn't just Christian families, right? There is an increase of not affiliated or non-believing or or even sort of other faiths that are putting their kids into these Christian schools because of what's being pushed, or the lack of discipline or the lack of consistency that are in the state system. And this perception that, the Christian schools, at least I'll teach my kids good values, sort of things. Yeah, doesn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, the societal push to have kicked God out of society in every area that we're seeing in Australia and around the world is having an impact on parents' decisions on where they send their kids, because the Christian schools are kind of the last sort of beacon in society that has that moral compass of, a Christian understanding or worldview, to whatever degree that is. And so that's, a shift we're seeing, and inevitably that's leading to more government involvement in how Christian schools can now operate,
Yeah.
The question of Christian schools just being able to hire Christian staff is under, discussion, which is horrible. But the government's trying to initiate all these revisions to the laws to make it harder for schools to truly maintain a Christian fabric and hold on to that. And so that's under attack. And I pray for schools to, stand firm in that and have people in authority that are fighting for schools, which I know there are. There are people in that space working to keep that schools right
protected
to hire based on their faith and values. Big news coming at the end of the year. A lot of talk recently over Australia's social media ban. They've included YouTube, apparently due to, wasn't initially mentioned in the sort of the main social media, things that kids are getting on, but YouTube's been, surprise, surprise, thrown in the mix. So, I have a strong view on this. I don't like the idea that government's pushing age verification on these programs. I recognize social media has caused a lot of terror and trauma and devastation in young people. But then the question we should be asking, from my view, is it the government's responsibility or the parents?
Yeah, exactly.
I side with the parents' responsibility.
Yeah.
And, I think the deeper undertone, if we go a little bit deeper and think about the critical thinking elements of this, the Trojan horse is laying the foundation for full digital ID requirements for everyone.
Yeah.
That's where I see
and that, I think that's a huge concern, especially for, these are students, kids underage, right? There's issues with consent here. And it's just becoming more and more of, again, that government oversight, that sort of government infiltrating inside of the home. And there's certain things that adults can't do until they're 18. And so why are we able to have this oversight, these digital sort of, whether it be face recognition or other sort of means in which it needs to be ID based for under 16-year-olds, that is my first concern in this space. And then, exactly. The responsibility is on the parent at the end of the day. And our kids aren't allowed to have social media. They do have YouTube to, they watch it, or they, Noah likes to make little edits in the different things that he's creative with. But with that, we oversee all of it, and it's no YouTube in their rooms on their own. It's only if we're watching it together as a family, or whatever it is, or in open spaces. And so that's our responsibility. That's our sort of decisions, and there's no need at this age for them to have social media. So that's sort of a protection thing that we're choosing. But again, it's on the parent. There are already, the social media platforms have their age recommendations, if kids are having accounts that are created, and that means they're lying about their ages or whatever it is, at the end of the day, it is on the parent.
And so, I think people that sit on the side that share my point of view on it will say, it's obviously opening the door to more invasive control over what we can and can't do. The Trojan horse of a digital ID, saying, well, we need to now know for adults, how old are you? Well, you've got to submit your ID. And that's already starting to happen now. Today it's YouTube. Tomorrow it's requiring a digital ID to read a blog or access a website. And so that's where I think those on the other side see it very clearly. Those on the others are just thinking child protection and safety, which we all support, but it's the underlying things that are happening behind the scenes that it's opening the door to do. A student of mine actually said, I can't get onto, was it Charlie Kirk talk show or whatever one of his links is. And I tried it and I couldn't actually access the website. If you don't know Charlie Kirk, American guy, active in the political space, particularly on, conservative issues and things. CharlieKirk.com works, but I couldn't do CharlieKirkShow.com. I think that was it. And so I thought it was blocked in Australia. You can't access it. And so I think that it feels like the digital fences are being just set up and becoming more intense.
Yeah.
And so, for education, I mean, it's not to say that kids won't be able to watch something on YouTube. I know there's a difference between creating an account and having an account on there than watching it, but still it's opening the door to a digital space where ID is required and things are being tracked.
Yeah.
No one wants
and it's
to
that
talk
tracking,
about it.
right? It's that tracking. Yeah, which
It's
brings
the
us back
tracking.
to COVID days with the
Yes.
QR codes. Where are you? Scan in here, scan in there. We need to know everywhere that you've been.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's something to be aware of. I often think like places like America, I can't see anything like that being rolled out because of the fears of government overreach. Just the obvious, like, no, you don't have the ability to tell us what our kids can and can't do. That's our responsibility. So watch this space. It's rolled out in the UK. Australia's following suit like it normally does.
Yep. Follow someone. If it's not, UK, it's then following America.
Yeah. So
One of the
hold out
two.
America. I know you will. Other global highlights happening around the world. Apparently, there are 300 million plus students homeschooled globally, because of the pandemic, should I say, which has really invigorated and driven that surge in numbers that we talk about each week, which is meant for the normalization of it. There's so much digital tech support for homeschooling families, which has also seen the rise of micro schools and pods and things happening in that space as well, which is a whole new market happening where parents are they're doing the homeschooling thing, but then they're going somewhere to meet with other kids in small groups, and learning that way, which is very flexible to their lifestyle. And so we're seeing that start to take off. And also, nations are increasing homeschool access. I know in Brazil, there's a big case happening now in the Supreme Court with a mother's, right to homeschool their child. Poland, South Africa. But on the other hand, you've got others tightening, like Germany, Spain, and Sweden. So I think the shift is happening at such a fast rate. Governments are trying to regulate and police how it looks and works. So, I think it's wherever you are in the world listening, watch what's happening in your country because things are moving. There's shifts happening.
Yeah. It's ironic that, COVID, was about so much control and depending on how you look at it, is it the testing of freedom? Is there something, bigger that it's sort of sussing out and, time will tell. But as a result of sending everyone home during COVID for school, that parents realized, oh, I could do this, or they're doing this sort of stuff at school. I don't want them doing that.
Teaching my child what? Yeah.
So there's this whole irony around, they've sent them home for this control, and yet they've lost, and it's doubled since COVID because, I definitely believe because it's for two reasons. Parents, families have realized, hey, I can do this. More and more families or adults are able to work from home, and so therefore are able to provide and be present to homeschool their kids. But also, I believe very strongly that half of the parents are looking at the stuff that their kids were doing and going, all right, I don't agree with this, or they're just moving too slowly, or this isn't suited to my kid, and so it's it's not a surprise that 3 million plus since COVID.
Yeah, 300 million.
300 million. Oh, 300 million. Yeah, wow.
That's just globally. Yeah. So big shift happening. So that wraps up today's episode. I appreciate you, James, for being in the hot seat and asking the questions to me.
No, I appreciate you sharing your story, the founder's story. I think with everything, it's really important for us to understand, or for anyone to understand, where we've come from and the why behind what we do at Transformation Network and in KTA. And for many, there's going to be that connection to your story and the why to that it just it lands and it makes sense, and it makes sense. And so anyone who's listened and wants to learn a bit more about Kale or about what we do at Kingdom Thinkers, iProject, Thinkers Academy, Transformation Network, go and check out our website at thetransformationnetwork.org.au. Download our prospectus, book in a free call. We'll be happy to have a chat and tell you a little bit more about what we do and if it's a good fit for you and your family. But this has been the Make School Great Again podcast, where education meets eternity, discipleship starts at home, and students learn to zoom out from a 33,000 foot perspective to the world. Thanks again, Kale, for sharing the backstory of the Transformation Network. Looking forward to the next time we connect.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. See you next time.
Bye-bye.